Hello and welcome to another episode of the BigTime Strength Podcast. Once again, we have a roundtable on with a really good crew of coaches, and I'm excited for this because this one's going to be specific to triphasic training, the ideas behind it, the settings that these coaches are using it in, and just the ins and outs of what they think about when they're programming for their athletes. So with all that said, before we hop into our show, I want to take some time to thank our sponsors. First sponsor that I want to thank is TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is the leading software provider for strength coaches around the nation. One of the coolest things about TeamBuildr is their ability to adapt to situations and take you where you're at right now and continue to grow it. I know they just put out a couple new features. A lot of coaches that have been hopping on and talking about that and saying it's great stuff. And that's the coolest things about TeamBuildr is just taking whatever problem it is, finding awesome solutions for it and taking it to the next level. So thankful for TeamBuildr and everything that they do for the show. Our second sponsor is PowerLift. PowerLift is leading provider of heavy duty strength equipment. Mike Richardson has been our contact for a long time. I've worked with Mike for it's been close to 10 years now, and there's not a better guy in the field to get you heavy-duty equipment that's going to last. So talked about it before. I've been at a couple places now that we have PowerLift stuff, and the stuff is what we have is 10 years old, and for half of the room anyway. And I know at Northwest Missouri State, it's approaching like 30 years now, and it still looks like it's within 5 years. So I love that about it. I know that it stands the test of time, and thankful for PowerLift for being a sponsor for our show. So thankful for those people. Now hopping into why you guys are here is just learning more about triphasic training. And to get into that, I would like to get a little bit of background of each coach in our panel and what it looks like at their school, kind of their setting that they're in and how they're implementing it. Just a little bit surface level stuff, and then we'll dive in deeper. Coach Meier, why don't you take it away first?
Hi, I'm Scott Meier. I am the head strength and conditioning coach at Farmington High School in Minnesota. I'm also a physical education teacher, and this is my 22nd year, I believe, in Farmington. We are a 9 through 12 building, and our student enrollment is about 22, almost 2,300 students, so we're a pretty good sized school. We are a growing community, and we're in probably arguably one of the toughest conferences in the state. So all of our teams are really on board with lifting. It's a battle day in, day out, no matter who we're playing in our conference. And then we've got lifting classes stuff during the school day, multiple lifting classes each hour. So we got kids running through the weight room all day long.
That's awesome. That's a great overview. 2,300 students is pretty nuts to me. And it sounds, when you say it's growing, I'm like, holy cow, where's the cap for that? So pretty cool. Maybe there'll be a second Farmington school after a little bit, huh?
Maybe. We'll never know. I don't know.
Maybe.
I might not be here by then. We'll see.
All right. Coach Dixon, give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, my name's Brad Dixon, and I'm the head strength coach, athletic PE/PE teacher, head football coach, and head track coach at Camp Point Central High School in Illinois. And I have about 1/10 of what Coach Meier has. We have about 260 kids. So we're a rural school. Our school sits in the country, surrounded by cornfields. So everyone, except for we have one kid that can walk to school that lives next door, but everyone else gets bused there. We, as of about 4 years ago, implemented a 0-hour PE. And that was our first strength training PE during the school day. And that's kind of morphed into 4 different athletic PE periods during the day. Whereas in the past, we used to just be before and after school lifting and in the summer. And so it's really allowed us to try new things and be consistent with, our training. And so, I'm here hopefully to learn some things from these guys and share some things that we've done at the small school level that we've learned over the last 4 or 5 years.
Thanks, Coach Dixon. Moving on, Coach Curtis, give us a little bit about you.
My name is Jessie Curtis. I'm from Manny High School in Manny, Louisiana. And just comparing the two profiles from the other people on the panel, I'm definitely closer to Coach Dixon. I'm at a 2A school in Louisiana. So we have an enrollment probably pretty close, around 300 total students. I am a classroom teacher, but I also run all the strength and conditioning programs for football, and I'm the head powerlifting coach. I'm pretty much involved in all the programming outside and inside for our football program. We have a athletic PE. We run a block schedule, so we have an athletic PE that I'm in charge of during that time, where we'll have all of the football, both junior varsity and varsity, and that's where we get our workouts in within the school setting. As far as Triphasic and everything that it means to me, it's been such a area that's pushed me to grow, and it got me to think about a lot of different things. I know we probably won't be able to cover everything today, but just so many different aspects that I've gone down have started with Triphasic, honestly. So it's been a huge inspiration to me and something that I've grown from and really progressed over time with.
Good. I'm excited to dive in more. This should be fun, Coach. And Coach Pederson, round us off. By the way, great last name, even though you spell it just a little bit different.
Well, you said it before. So yeah, I'm Andrew Pederson. I'm a 712 ed and health teacher for Fillmore Central High School. That's in the southeast corner of Minnesota. Our enrollment is about 275 students. So I think Coach Meier's kind of the outlier here. I think we got some more smaller schools, and that's it's been great because we'll talk about it. It doesn't matter size of enrollment. This is a wonderful program. We're pretty much a solid year into the Triphasic training, and kind of like Coach Dixon said, I'm just looking to keep learning more. Kind of tell you what we're doing, but lifting wise. We offer the before and after school. We're a block schedule now. We do have it's called the sports science class that I teach. It's a combination of fitness plus exercise science, sports nutrition, sports psychology. It's a combination of all it. So we're not always in the weight room, but we try our best to get there as often as possible. But our big moment, our big season is the summer for sure. And I think a lot of coaches can attest to that as well. But we do our best with in-season training with every sport coach. I'm so blessed because every sport coach on campus is invested in our strength and conditioning program. So it's excited to get talking here.
All right, I appreciate it. There you have it. There's our panel. Now let's actually hop into this. So I'm going to open this up for discussion, let it flow however it does. And the biggest thing that I want to know here at the beginning is what was the reason that you made the choice to go to Triphasic? What was the something that you heard, something that you read that made you interested? And then when you actually were like, oh man, I'm going to pull the trigger on this.
Well, I can start here. And I can actually thank Coach Meier for this. Actually, I through Twitter and everything, I noticed what Coach Meier was doing. We had implemented certain, concepts of the Triphasic training prior, without probably knowing that we were doing the Triphasic training prior to implementing it. But in conversations with Coach Meier that I've had, I just knew right away that this is a program that I really want to implement because I know how passionate Coach is about it, and so I know that's where it was. And then just buying Coach Cal Dietz's Triphasic training book, diving deep into that was also the just that cherry on top that I was just really excited to get started. And I know even just after 1 year of doing it, the kids are they're flourishing, within our program, and we're not looking back.
That's great.
I kind of, whenever I started Triphasic, I actually stepped away from the program for a year. I moved somewhere else, and during that year, I was just coaching football. I wasn't in charge of weightlifting, and I did a lot of study during that year, a lot of self-directed study, and I came across Triphasic. And I began to implement it actually on myself. And I listened to a podcast and it got me interested. And I began to look into it and I implemented it on myself. And then I read the entire book, obviously. And whenever I got back to Manny High School, I then chose to implement it. And I just saw great results from there.
That's awesome, Coach. It's nice when you go down those rabbit holes and you start to learn, you're like, oh man, this is something that I can apply. This is what I can use. And then I totally love testing it on yourself first.
Yeah, I started with Triphasic probably, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I've actually known Cal for a long time. I did my internship at the University of Minnesota, and Cal came. He was a grad assistant after that, a couple of years, but I would pop in and stuff. So I was aware of Triphasic, but I never really looked at the details. And I wasn't really at the point with our programming where I thought we needed a big change or anything. And then just, things kind of leveled off. I'm like, looking for that little edge on what can we do a little bit differently to help our athletes, improve a little bit more. And just, so kind of started down the Triphasic path and listened to some podcasts, read some things online. And, after that, I'm like, I really need to buy this book and figure this whole thing out, because it sounds like something that really works well, but I just needed to know how to do it. And, the nice thing about it is I really didn't have to change what we were doing a whole lot. You can just apply those Triphasic principles, to your existing program, change up the tempos. So, our lifts stayed kind of the same, but we changed up, the tempos and how we were doing it, packaged it all together, trained for the power, the speed and stuff like that. And man, after that first full cycle and our kids' maxes were just shooting through the roof, then kids were really sold on it. It's paid off big time, and we've been doing it ever since.
I guess, I had heard of Triphasic, and I guess it was just one of those things. We were training in the summer, and I felt like we had, we were always, seems like we were always playing catch up before I had athletic PE. And so I guess to me, I just didn't have a lot of time. I felt like I didn't know that much about it. And I felt like it was something else that I was going to have to try to add in. And like I said, it wasn't until we got into athletic PE, I got to hanging around with guys like Chris Corfist, and then here in Cal, and really even some of the mass specific force guys talk about concentric only. That made me want to go back and look at, okay, so then what is the eccentric and the isometric part? I hear all this concentric only. I read the Underground Secrets of Sprint Training. Who's that? Barry Ross. So I kind of read things on the opposite side. And then, so that really wanted me to go back and look at, okay, then what's the value of the eccentric and the isometric? And then when you hear guys talk about how, in sprinting, it's really a series of isometric movements, you're holding shapes and things like that. And then just what it does and how it changes tissue. I understand the concentric part and the mass specific force for older kids, for very developed kids that aren't looking for mass. But, as a football coach, I am, I get linemen that are 5'9", 180 pounds and do not have an ounce of muscle on them as freshmen. And so part of what we have to do is we have to build armor. We have to create that, resiliency. And so it has been vital, I guess, for us. Some of the issues that we kind of have to trend with or deal with in a small school, though, is when's the best time to implement the eccentric phase. We've got a lot of multi-sport athletes that go from one sport to the next. During the COVID right now, we might play 3 basketball games in a row here. We're trying to fit all this stuff in. And so I think with that came, how to be mindful with trying to program it and when to program it in and things like that. And we're still kind of sorting that out. And I think, I guess the best thing that I try to do to pair with that is, what does that do to, our sprinting times, our vertical jump times, our broad jump times, repeat jumps? Are we seeing improvement? And if we're not, what do we go back? What did we change in the training block and maybe how we can adjust it? So I think, even more so than max weights is trying to see what that does to the rest of the athletic performance.
Maybe before we go too much further, maybe if anybody would be interested in giving an overview of how you use Triphasic, what it actually means within your program, because there's different things to Triphasic, and a lot of it, there's some in-depth stuff, obviously, in the book what does it look like in your setting? How are you using it? We'll just go around the horn with this if everybody's ready. Coach Meier, do you want to start out for us?
Yeah, sure. I start out with kind of I call it like a block zero or a GPP. So we'll go, depending on the group I'm working with, it'll be like 1 to 3 weeks of that. If it's my really advanced lifters, we might just do 1 week, but beginners will go 3 weeks. And then we go into our eccentric block, and I do 3 weeks of eccentric, follow that up with 2 weeks of isometric, and then it's peaking after that for us. And I know Cal gets into some really complex, with the French contrast and other things like that. And that's just that we haven't done that, partly for time and schedule wise. But that's just too much for my kids. Even just doing a superset with 2 things is very difficult sometimes. So combining 4 different things with 4 very specific intents at each station, that's not something I'm willing to try yet, and we haven't needed it. So we'll kind of peak, but we're on basically like a 12, anywhere from a 10 to 12 week cycle with our classes. We're on trimesters, and then our sports seasons match up pretty closely to that too. Winter will stretch it out a little bit, but it's in general, it's 3 weeks of eccentric and 2 weeks of iso, and then I hammer it home from there.
That's great. Coach Dixon, what's it look like for you guys?
I would say, where I like to start kids is in honestly the isometric phase. And I didn't even call it isometrics for a long time. But I want to teach that positioning first, kind of the same thing we would do in football. So we're going to try to teach, what we want a split squat to look like in an isometric pattern or isometric squat pattern, or, a hip hinge. I understand there's some eccentrics, but I think being able to hold those certain positions, even a bench press, that's kind of where I start. Like with our block zero, with our first year kids that come in. And then, in a normal year, then in like, if I get them in the summer, I'm working with the first year kids in the summer, and we're kind of in that isometric positioning phase before we ever start worrying about anything else, where our older kids will hop into an eccentric phase 2 to 3 weeks, depending on where we're at. Usually it seems like we've got like 6 weeks in the summer. So we may start with a 2-week start of the summer eccentric phase, because, all my older kids finished athletic PE May 30th. And, our first day of training is, June 1st or whatever for the summer. And then we'll get into an ISO phase. And then we usually have 4th of July break. And then we'll train into a concentric phase. And, depending on where those younger kids are, I kind of, we've all got those kids that after a couple days, I know they're ready to do a little bit more. And so I may push those younger kids into one of those phases. Otherwise, I always say, and I understand, I'm kind of joking, but it's like my summer's always tough because I'm with the kids that need the most work for the whole time. And our other coaches get to, do all these other fun things with the older kids. And I feel like I'm stuck outside the weight room doing this stuff. And then when we get in season, we won't do a ton of eccentric work when we're in our sports seasons for the guys that are in season. Now we can mix it in, if there's a stretch of games where maybe we know our opponents are not as good, like in football, where we may put it in here for a week, things like that. I've heard Cal talk about that. We kind of do the same thing with our football practices where, if we know it's a week that looks like maybe our starters are only going to play half the time, we may have a tougher week in practice. So we might pair those things together. But like a big eccentric phase will come right after Christmas, because we got a lot of, if we have 50 football players and maybe 12 of them play basketball and 10 of them wrestle, we'll have a large chunk of guys that'll be going in that same eccentric phase. We'll kind of have a rebuilding phase transition after the season's over. Hopefully we play late in November. And then we come back with Christmas break. And that's how we started this year. We had a weird year because we weren't allowed into our weight room until about November 6th or 8th. And we hadn't been in a weight room since March, like 13th. So we ran like a 6-week GPP phase or something like that. And then we hopped right into eccentrics. And so we ran that 8-week, kind of what we would have done in the summer. We just ran that phase up to this point, even with guys, because we didn't think we were going to have any seasons. And now, we ended up having a basketball season, but we were through the eccentric and the ISO phase. So that's kind of what it looks like. And then moving forward, as we get back to normal, I think it's going to be a big part of how we start our off seasons for, individual kids in certain sports. If, like I said, our football is a large group, then if we get through basketball and you're not doing baseball and track, you may run the same thing. So that's kind of how that's how I envision it moving forward, having groups of them kind of in different spots based upon where they're at.
Yeah, so a couple of things that these guys have already said that I can kind of agree with. Like Coach Dixon said, he starts out with isometrics. This year, starting out in the spring, I actually started with my kids on isometrics, but these were body weight isometrics actually to start for positional awareness and just take it back down to, ground level essentially, because everybody's dealing with COVID. Everybody's talking about how COVID is affecting their sports seasons and things. We came right off of a competitive football season, and I wanted to kind of give my guys some time to get their legs back underneath them while also making some strength gains and gaining positional awareness and better technique at the same time. So this year I started out with isometrics, starting out with body weight and then going lightly weighted in a variety of positions: split squats, regular squat, hinge base, foot and ankle complexes, things such as that. And then I kind of I'm going through a normal strength profile right now. Now, whenever I'll get to a more traditional triphasic method is typically, as the other coaches alluded to, at the beginning of my summer, because one of the important things about triphasic is the timing of it. What a lot of people don't realize or what a lot of people don't think about is, as you accumulate stress, how that's going to work out eventually. And one of the biggest things about triphasic is, and Cal Dietz says it all the time, that you're going to dip in performance for a bit. And that's probably why Coach Dixon alluded to not doing eccentrics during the season. I don't really do eccentrics either during the season, whereas I do isometrics. But I'm going to stack that at the beginning of my summer for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've already kind of gone through a traditional concentric-based strength block. And one of the reasons I got into the triphasic method is because I began to see a lot of plateaus in my athletes' numbers. And so we've built this profile of strength, and a way for me to continue to progress that throughout the entire year was injecting this triphasic method right at the beginning of my summertime to really kick things off. And what I've noticed is it's just built a resiliency and a strength profile that lasts throughout the entire year, essentially. I'm not seeing plateaus. I'm not seeing kids losing strength over time. And this year, coming off of COVID, I was away from my kids for roughly about 3 months. And we came back, we did some GPP, and then we got into triphasic. And you would think our numbers wouldn't be as impressive. Our numbers this year were better than any numbers I've had team-wide, max-wise. Just because it all came to fruition at the correct time. I mean, I had great numbers. I know weight room numbers don't always transfer to the field, but if it's done appropriately, it does. So we're going to hit that triphasic in the summer, and that's going to take me roughly about 7 to 8 weeks. And then I'll begin to move towards more sport-specific things. And you've alluded to the fact that triphasic is so much more than just eccentric, isometric, concentric. I've played around with a lot of those different things. I have used French contrast methods, and I employed it this year for the first time. I tell you why. I had split weight rooms going on, and I had to work. I've only got so many racks, and I had to think about how can I provide them with a quality workout that's going to be sport specific. So I began to throw together these contrast methods after looking at some of the French contrast things, and I was able to run workouts that complemented each other so well. And I follow block methodology throughout all of my programming. And just to be able to insert a contrast here with a minimum effective dose, I found that to be so effective in continuing to keep my strength up, because my strength obviously shifts to speed strength more in season. But just to throw them a little bit of minimum effective dose of French contrast has been wildly beneficial to me. So I do implement that as well.
When you're doing your contrast, are you just pairing 2 exercises together, or is it kind of like the whole profile of 3 or 4 in the line, and how do you set that up if so?
I will mix it up. I mean, there's been times where I've done just kind of like a pairing, but there's more often than not, I have gone through the entire traditional 4 exercise setting. And what I like to do is I like to give my kids whenever I'm in season, time is so short. So like they have to know what they're doing. So what I like to do in some of my blocks to throw in some things, they've already gone through every single exercise complex that they're going to encounter whenever we get to the end season. So I had already drilled that French contrast earlier, whenever time, was not of the essence. So they kind of knew what to expect. I'd already kind of given them kind of a dress rehearsal in that. But we're going to have a section with our banded our band set up, because we don't have triphasic bars. We're not that fancy, but I've got my band set up. I've got a section right outside. I've got my hurdle hop section set up, dumbbells set up at each rack so they can step off of that. And then they obviously have their rack-based movements. I had 2 weight rooms running, so the other one would have been deadlift or clean based, and probably more plyo box or bounding outside.
That's awesome, Coach. I'm excited to dig in a little bit deeper. I know everybody likes to see how people are pairing their contrast stuff. That's one of the things I love. And honestly, if you ask my athletes, one of their favorite things to do is contrast training. They think it's so cool. And when they ask why, and we can kind of give you the detailed explanation of it, they're like hooked. Like, oh man, it's like, not to say all the other training is not important, right? We still need isometrics. We still need eccentrics. We still need concentrics. But it's nice to have just that little change up every once in a while. And it's just a really good thing to hook kids even more. So awesome, Coach Curtis. Coach Pedersen.
Yeah, like I said, we're still kind of that first year into it. I'd say we are. I mean, going from the book, that's pretty much was my guide, so I feel like I'm doing probably some sort of a superset contrast, with the kids, if it's our total body work, like a deadlift or like a clean, a snatch, we pretty much, that's the only thing they're doing at that time. But bench, squat, any of the other lifts out there, then we would pair, could superset it, pair it. The kids, again, it took a little while to buy in, but pretty much just like everybody else has said, that when they were noticing that, wow, we got stronger and faster, with this, that was, they were hooked from the start. So what it looks like for us is, I've tried to just instill with the kids. It really, the amount of times you're going to lift is going to be different, whether it's in season or out of season, but we're still doing the same thing. So I would say when we're programming, and I try and go from end of the season toward, I plan from the end of the season, then go backwards. And then, so we will start the season, even if it's in season, we will still do eccentrics, but again, they're only lifting twice a week. It'll be a little less, the lower end of the percentages, and it's quick, a week or 2, and then we go, again, it just to keep them in the movement, because again, and that's just they've bought into that. They've bought into the fact that, okay, we still are going to train no matter whether we're out of season or in season. It's going to be the same training, and then by the time we get to summer, they know exactly what we're doing. Again, it's going to be a little harder, a little more intense. But again, then we get back to in season, and they know that this is only going to help them. And I think I was a benefit. We've been a benefit of some successful seasons recently. I mean, especially I know we had our girls have really bought into the triphasic training. It helps when the girls goes to state last year for basketball, first time ever. So, you get those little rewards that even though they are lifting in the season, they realize, okay, yeah, this does help. It's not the end all be all, of course, but, just that little bit of added success in there does help. And guys have seen success throughout the years too. So, but more of the guys, if they're seeing numbers, whether it's in the weight room or in or sprints, that they're hooked more. But a lot of our girls are going to see if it's going to translate to wins. That's what they're seeing as well. So Like I said, we're very just keep it going. We'll start a season with eccentric, and we will superset along the way, especially but again, time's of the essence, and I think everybody is understanding that.
Yeah, and this is to anyone that wants to hop in on this, because Coach Pederson brought it up and we kind of hit on it a little bit with other coaches. But when are you programming that eccentric block? And let's say excluding summer, like we all understand summer for most people, unless you're Iowa, where we used to have baseball and softball during the summer, that's kind of like a free training time. Okay. But during the school year, multi-sport athlete type of look, or if you're even a single sport athlete, are you implementing in season, out of season, postseason? What's that look like for you? And I guess along with that, what does it look like moving into from eccentric to that isometric phase? When do you try to time that up with the season also?
For us, really in season and off season are running pretty close to the same schedule. Kind of like I said, we're on trimesters for classes, and that matches up with the season, so it works well for everybody. So the eccentric stuff will come first after the general GPP or whatever. So it'll be early on in the season, and then the isometrics follow up right after that. And then our coaches know that, and luckily they're on board. They understand that we want our kids to be strong at the end, and peak during playoffs. And some of them are more than willing to train even harder than I think they should, to get the benefits of really working hard in season, because they know it's going to pay off at the end. So I'm lucky that I haven't had coaches really concerned about being overly sore, overly tired. And we really haven't. We adjust things and periodize stuff, and some days are heavy, some days are light every week. But luckily our head sport coaches aren't afraid to really get after it in season, knowing, especially early, knowing it's going to pay off at the end.
I love when I hear coaches utilize the in season well. The longest uninterrupted time of training, and I think that's always cool to see that.
I guess just to piggyback off Coach Meier there, I think I said it earlier too. We're fortunate too. Every single coach, if they're not coaching in season, they're willing to help out and help supervise the weight room out of season. So yeah, I would say programming wise, kind of what I alluded to earlier was, we keep going. So I would say every sports season, whether it's our fall sports, then our winter sports, then our spring sports, they're all starting the same. So, they're all starting and ending the same. So whether you're in football or volleyball for us, you're going to start with the eccentric. But if you're not in any of those sports and you're part of our out of season group, then you'll start the same thing. You might go a little bit longer with each, eccentric, isometric, concentric. But again, yeah, just like Coach Meier said, the kids have bought into the fact that we do want to peak at the end of the season. That's when we want to be doing those, that speed phase, the banded phase with all of our kids. So then, and it just starts over again in the winter. Okay, those that are in basketball or wrestling, they're doing their in season, two lifting twice a week. But then out of season, we're trying to get them 4 times a week. Same thing. They're just going to work out of season, going to work a little bit harder, but they're still going to work. They're all, again, same motion, was eccentric to isometric to concentric, and then eventually get to that speed. So again, I've been blessed with great coaches to help me out. And I think we're all probably to the benefit of that too. And how much it does help to have those other coaches willing to help out. And willing to take time out of their day, especially in the summer. I don't think any of us could do our programs if it wasn't for the buy-in with all the other coaches on staff.
If you're talking as far as the implementation, for me, again, the summer is going to be my more traditional triphasic approach, and that's going to be the bedrock that kind of sets everything up. that follows it. So I'm working with specifically the football group. So our first 6 to 8 weeks are going to be completely and totally triphasic based. Now, with that, I've used a ton of things that come out of triphasic as well. I get increasingly focused on speed as I get closer to my competitive season. So I'm going to spend 6 to 8 weeks focusing on the heavy eccentrics and the isometric portion, and then moving into my concentrics, and probably introduce a little bit of French contrast to familiarize them with that. And then the thing that would probably be most closely related to triphasic going forward in season that I use as my strength is the French contrast method, moving closer to the joint angles that we're going to produce force in football with. I'm also going to use, 55 to 80%, as Dietz talks about in the triphasic manual as well, is going to be a bedrock, because I'm still going to be getting my force production, but I'm going to be able to move it at a velocity that's going to transfer better to sport. So during season, I'm going to use the French contrast. I will use varying degrees of isometrics for various things. I'm not going to do eccentric. So my JV during that time will actually probably go through a more intensive triphasic portion because I have them and they're not necessarily in season. So I'm actually working my JV pretty hard with triphasic during the fall, because that's really truly their time to build strength. And that's my time where I'm with them, because we have roughly I work at a small school, but we have roughly around 90 kids that play football. Almost every kid walking the halls plays football. So I'm obviously focusing on starters in the summer, and that's my time to familiarize these kids and get them moving in the right way and get them ready for the next year. So my JV will actually be going through the triphasic methods during the fall, and my triphasic methods with varsity are going to be more French contrast and speed strength related.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Coach Curtis said there. We're very general based until we get into the season, and then we're going to train specific, joint angles. For example, right now in season, we are in a kind of a heavy concentric high box squat kind of training in that 135-degree angle. I'm not concerned right now with the heavy back squat to full depth for my football team that's getting ready to open up with week 1. We've been doing that, so we've kind of checked that box off. And I think the closer you get to competition, the more specific you need to get to and the less general. And so, like I said, we also stay away from that eccentric stuff during that time. I think they're getting some of that work anyway in their sport. And I think isometrics are a great way, especially if you are a little bit beat up from the previous opponent. Let's say, you played a 4-quarter game that went down to the wire, maybe even overtime, and you get your guys back the next week. I'm big on rest and recovery, and we track vertical jumps and flying 10 times and things like that each week. So I know kind of where the CNS is and where our guys are. And in the past, I did a horrible job of understanding, and we would just hop right into whatever it said for, week 4 of the phase we are on. And we've been able to, knock on wood, pretty much stay injury free for really the last 2.5 years. When you can, at the small school level, when you can have your entire roster dress for 14 straight weeks, that gives you a huge advantage. And so, like I said, I think with the lower training age, freshmen, sophomores, you can do about anything when you want. You could sprint them probably every day. You could eccentric for 4 weeks during the season. But as you get my best running back, 6 foot, 200 pounds, and has ran 22, almost 23 miles an hour. That dude is strong enough. And right now it's about keeping him healthy and keeping him explosive. And so we don't get into a lot of that eccentric stuff in season. That's just, and like I said, my groups are smaller. I don't have 2,000 kids that are running through. I've got about 100. So I pretty much know a little bit about every single one of them and where they're at. And I let them tell me, how they feel. For example, our basketball team's on the road. If they come back first thing 8-10 tomorrow, and some of them are kind of beat up because they've been double dipping with football. Some of them have, because we got a heck of a crossover right now. So we've had kids last Wednesday that practiced football and then went to a basketball game, practice football, practice basketball in the morning, practice football in the afternoon, practice basketball, then football on Saturday. And now they played last night, or played tonight. And I'll see them in the weight room first thing. And most kids won't say anything, but they know they've got the opportunity to tell me how they feel. And like I said, we may cut depth a little bit. We may cut weight. We may, change exercises. And so, I mean, I guess I err more on the side of that. And it's really grown our stuff. I mean, it's an elective class, and I would say I've got all but 2 football players in there. I think I did the math. We had all but about 10 or 12 athletes in the whole school that aren't in athletic PE, during the school day. So I guess that I'm trying to keep them as healthy and happy and fresh as I can, and explosive. And that's where we're at in season.
I like that. There's the reason why I like that is because we've got a couple different ways on this panel of doing things. And I think it's best for listeners to be able to hear both sides of any issue and be able to make decisions on their own for what their situation allows. And that's one of the coolest things I think about strength and conditioning in general, or sport performance, even more specifically, is, like taking your population in the situation that you're in and getting them to be the best that they can be when they need to be their best is an awesome puzzle. And I think that's part of the reason why so many people have different ways to do things, is because there's so many different variables that play into it. So thank you for that time around the horn there. One of the things that I've seen here recently is possibly this misconception that triphasic training is complex, or that beginners should not be doing triphasic training. And I was talking to these guys, and I'm like, I just trying to stir the pot a little bit with them and dive into this topic a little bit more, because my mindset's actually opposite of that. I think it's great for beginners, and I want to hear these guys, what their opinions are on that, and give us a rundown of why they choose to do it the way that they do. So anybody can hop in on this one, and we'll try to hear from everybody.
I can start first. I feel like I've been going last. I would say before triphasic, I was all over the place on the foundational movements and how to teach them and so forth. And once I dove into triphasic, I mean, it made sense to me as a football coach. We start with walking through how we want things to be done. We start with stances. We hold stances for a period of time. We adjust things. We do all that. And then I would take them in the weight room, and everything was concentric, up and down. Well, of course, whether you put a dumbbell in their hand, their own body weight, or put an empty bar on their back, kids are going to try to do things as fast as they can. And they never really learn how to do it. And they don't, because they've never done it, they don't know what it should feel like. And so I think that the eccentric really, like I said, we start with the isometric, but even the eccentric, and I'm a big front squat guy for a long time, because I think, we actually start with the zombie squats. And then we transition to front squat. I mean, we just started putting a bar on our back this last week for, it's been 13 weeks. Because, and kids say, why can't we back squat? Well, let me tell you this, you can back squat, and I'll show them a horrible back squat form. I said, you can go down and up with weight on your back. I said, but if we put this bar in front of you and we make you go down super slow, you have to be very solid, and you have to learn how to move the weight, or you're going to dump it. And so I think for us, teaching the isometric, then coming back for the eccentric from a teaching perspective, holds those positions and teaches the relationship, core, erector, spinal, all those things. It teaches that. And, I think Coach Curtis brought up ankle, feet, all those complexes can be taught. I'm not against, and I think Coach Meier uses the wedges. I'm not against putting plates under people. I think sometimes we get so whacked out in the powerlifting world of simple things. But if I can slide a plate under some guys' heels and get them in a better position to teach them how to handle that weight, I'm all for that. Whatever. Hopefully we can, improve their ankle mobility and things like that. But I think, I've heard Corpus talk about, if you put a bar on a kid's back in a bad movement pattern, the body releases cortisol, and it kind of starts shutting down. It gets in that fight or flight, and you could do an entire training session, and you're reinforcing a bad movement pattern, and you've probably gotten slower and less explosive because of the, what it's done to the CNS. And so, and it made sense. And so we've really tried to hammer in through these eccentric and isometrics, how we want the movement to look, how can that transfer to athletic performance. And, without that, I think it's hard from a concentric point of view to teach those patterns, because it's hard to slow kids down. They've been taught to go their whole life. And when you tell them, put a bar on their back and say, go down and up, most kids are going to kind of get out of control, especially at the beginning. So that's how we use it to start.
I can go next. Or Jesse, you want to go ahead?
No, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when we started this, I was approaching it as this is going to be an advanced thing for my top guys. And really it was because, our maxes were really high on all the lifts, but we were not very fast. We were moving, the weight slowly, which doesn't carry over to sport. So I was kind of approaching this as a way to build power and speed in our lifts. And then like Jesse said too, he tried it out on himself first. So I basically did the same thing. I started a week earlier than what I was going to program for my athletes, kind of test run it myself. And after the first week, I'm like, wow, it's tough, but man, this would be fantastic for beginners. I ran our advanced guys through it. And then getting a second week in myself, I'm like, okay, everybody's going to do this. If you're doing an 8-second down count on a squat, that gives you a lot of time to really think about how you're moving, feel how you're moving. You're going to get full depth because you got to keep going down and down and down to that basement. So just for teaching the lifts and learning body control and learning how how you should feel while you're moving and doing the lift, it's incredible. It's awesome. And our technique from our beginners causing the slowdown, like Brad said, beginners they're always in a hurry to rush, get things done and get through it and go to the next thing. This really forces them to slow down and concentrate on the movement. And since then, our technique it's improved a lot just from that.
One thing before you hop in, Coach Curtis, it was a coaching hack I saw somebody put on Twitter. I don't know, it might've been like Joe Otari or something like that. But it was a coaching hack. If you want your kids to do a 4-second down, put 6 on their page. Or if you want them to do a 5-second isometric, put 7. I mean, like, that's extreme stuff. But I'm just saying, like, it's kind of funny because kids are in that mode of go as fast as you can. So, like, it's kind of interesting how that plays out. Right now, I'm really debating on putting a metronome on our stereo right now because it's bothering me so much. I'll go up to behind a kid and be like, hey, this is how I count right now. Okay. Can you count with me? They laugh a little bit, but then they're a little annoyed too. So just trying to teach them.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's extreme at all, because that's exactly what I do. It's like for a longer count, I'll do 2 seconds longer than what I want. And if it's like a 3-second hold or something, I'll program it for 4. But yeah, they always count fast. So I'll have partners count them. Or if they've got their iPad or phone, pull up a stopwatch so they can watch it. But yeah, they're always fast. So I always program it longer than it should. And if they do actually get the full time, well, that's just, bonus time under tension for those guys.
There's just a couple of things about this. As far as with beginners, number one, I think you have to identify your population. So I use Triphasic in a variety of manners. Like with my powerlifting team, I super maximally loaded them this year for the competitive season. Why? It's 11 lifters. They're extremely good lifters. That's what they do for sport. So I super maximally loaded them. Would I do that with my football team? Absolutely not, because I've got 50 kids at one time and they're not as technical as them. So number one, you have to identify your population. But if we're talking about at the beginning stages of lifting, number one thing I heard from 2 of the coaches that just discussed this was time domain. And we're talking about time under tension and time under stress. And you guys are talking about being able to learn those positions and putting a time domain. It really just changes everything. If you flip it on its head and you sprint and you don't time people, well, they're not as encouraged to run as fast as they possibly can. If you're not putting a time domain on the eccentric lowering and the isometric portions, and it's going to be blown past. Like I went to a powerlifting meet roughly 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was watching these guys lift, and I thought they were going to fall through the floor. They were going down so fast. And these guys are in squat suits. I'm like, why in the world? What are you doing? They were new to the sport, obviously. And that's what you see with kids whenever they lift. Like you guys have alluded to, they rush, and everything is out of sync. And they just don't take the time to slow down and learn the movements. And one of the things that really spoke to me with Triphasic is the scientific side of it. And whenever you look at the weight room, you're thinking about how does my weight room transfer to my sport? And a lot of the times people think a back squat can't transfer or a deadlift can't transfer. But if it's done in the appropriate way, if you're looking at what the eccentric does for the muscle function of somebody over time, and the way that it strengthens their stretch shortening cycle, and the way that it will cut the GTO out because the GTO's, stopping everything. I mean, this is becoming sport specific. It's something that can be moved to that's extremely sport specific in the future. So why would I not want to latch on to that and get that moving with kids at an early training age? Because it's going to slow things down. It's going to put a time domain on it. And I'm glad you guys said it too. I feel like I'm hoarse whenever we're doing triphasic because I'm going around. I got the hand going. I feel like I'm hoarse at the end of the day. So I'm glad I'm not the only guy with that. And one thing I said earlier with the all gas, no brakes, like you wouldn't get in a car that has no brakes. And we all know sports are sprinting essentially. And we've already alluded to the fact that the eccentric and the isometric muscle action is extremely important. You're just setting your athletes up to get injured in the long run. One thing we haven't really said in regards to triphasic, not only does it get you strong, but it's going to bulletproof you down the line. I mean, obviously things happen, but I've seen great injury reductions in using triphasic. So why wouldn't I want to use that on kids at a young age and get them prepared and bulletproof for competition?
I can see Coach Curtis right now in front of a lifter. His voice is gone, and he's counting the backcourt seconds of like a basketball game, right? Like he's throwing his hand out. 1, 2. I like that. That was good. That was a good visual for us. For everybody that's listening on the podcast, he was throwing his arm out just like a referee does. So smart move there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to finalize everything with about what you all were saying, I agree with everything. And not only are we seeing the fast counting with the actual lifter, I'll notice it with the spotter too. I mean, I think so. And not only are we hoarse just from talking, but trying to talk through those masks also is doesn't help our volume either. So, and if it's blaring music and everything, but yeah, it's I think we must have all saw that tweet that was to hold it for a couple seconds more. And I know I've started to program that in as well. But I guess with just the benefits with with being in the only kind of finishing up our first year of it, just the form I've seen and the safety of all of our lifters. It doesn't matter what lift they're doing. It's just, they look safer doing it. I mean, it's so much fun to watch a kid that has struggled getting depth on a squat. And it's so much fun as soon as we were implementing this, and they just couldn't, for whatever reason, could not, their, brain wasn't working, wasn't firing off, wasn't connecting. And all of a sudden you get through the eccentric, they're struggling, they're trying to get down low. And all of a sudden it gets to isometric and boom, magically, they're there. It makes sense to them. They're paused into this position, and then throwing right into, then the transition to the concentric phase, and then boom, all of a sudden their weight shoots up. It's just, it is so much fun to watch. And again, it's not just the beginning lifters, it's our seniors. Our seniors are seeing it. In all the lifts, and it's not just our bilateral lifts, it's the unilateral lifts, just seeing them in the single leg squats. And RDL's balance has been improved among our athletes here, and it's just been, there's so many benefits. And again, we're just seeing this in 1 year, and when you're noticing, and when all of our sport athletes or sport coaches, I should say, the volleyball coach is saying how much faster his volleyball girls were, and could see the transition between that, and not just varsity. I mean, they're seeing it 7 through 12, so going back to to the beginning lifters, it's just the form that the way it emphasizes form and safety among each lift is definitely my top reason for introducing triphasic to our first year. I mean, our first year athletes, they're zero training age, if you want to call it, with our incoming seventh grade that always comes in every summer. So, and they just getting that introduction to all of it is there's so many benefits. And as Coach Curtis said, the injury reduction is it's mind-boggling how well that is and translates. And we all know injuries can happen, but we're definitely through this is helping a lot.
Coaches, we're to the point where we've given a base understanding. We've talked about the size of our schools, how we're implementing, how, like the timings that we're implementing them within seasons, kind of the misconceptions, even some tips and some things that we like, some of the benefits. If you had one more time to speak, just think about one of the things that's like standing out to you, or if you wanted a listener to know that maybe it isn't doing triphasic, something that they'd want to know before we leave here and kind of wrap it up for us, that will be your opportunity. So one thing that I'm thinking about, if I am starting to go through, should I do triphasic or not? One of the things I think about primarily is if we want our kids to end up getting the benefits of the weight room. Okay, if we want them to, from 9th grade to 12th grade, maybe even if you have them younger than that, 9th grade to 12th grade, if we want them to be the best that they can be and get all the benefits from the weight room like that we'd like to, a lot of people say something to this effect. They say, I'm training athletes, I'm not training lifters. And I understand, and I totally get it. But if your athlete becomes a better lifter, therefore, in turn, they're going to become a better athlete. And so I'm not trying to make it a big Twitter war or anything like that. All I'm saying is this system, this idea, this type of training allows people to get really, really good at foundational movements. Okay. That seems like a win-win for me. So that's kind of the way I'm going to wrap it up with my thoughts towards it. Coaches, however you want to jump in and kind of give your concluding thoughts, go for it.
I can go first here on this one. I know, when you hear about triphasic, one of the nice things about it, and I know Cal says this too, there's no real right or wrong way to do it. There's multiple ways, and we've heard that today from everybody. We take these principles and apply it to our own situation. So it's super easy to start using. But I know people really get kind of hung up on, or they hear about the eccentric focus and the isometric pauses and stuff. But I think the key that gets overlooked a lot is that concentric speed. I'm constantly hammering on our kids, if we're on the eccentric, we're lowering, slow down. But when you get to that bottom, you are trying to lift the weight as fast as you possibly can. No matter what, whenever we're lifting the weight up, it's always max speed. And like I told our beginners, our off-season kids today started on our eccentric block. I'm like, you might not feel like you're moving fast, and you most likely by that last set, you aren't moving fast, but that intent to move the weight as fast as you can is absolutely critical. You've got to be trying as hard as you can. And then the other point with the isometric too, we're not going to lower down slow and then to hold it. It's got to be down fast. You're going to slam on the brakes and you're going to stop that weight as fast as you possibly can and hold it there, working on that decelerating strength. And that's what carries over to the field, with your cutting and change of direction and stuff like that. So it's got to be all the way down as fast as you can, slam on the brakes, and then fast up. But always, I'm constantly preaching, get it up fast, lift fast, back up fast, whatever. So that part I think can easily be overlooked because you're focusing so much on the slow eccentrics and the pauses, but that fast concentric, I think that's absolutely critical to this whole thing.
Yeah, just to kind of close it out as far as triphasic and everything that it means to me, and just kind of to anybody that is not utilizing it or doesn't really know a lot about it. Number one, triphasic, like I've alluded to, is so much more, and it encouraged me to look at some things, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. If you pick through triphasic, you are just kind of hit in the face with the role of the nervous system as far as how it regulates muscular movement and its role within sport. So one of the biggest things I actually took away from triphasic was the fact that I needed to study the nervous system more and how it applies to things. And it got me thinking about stress, because so often I would think of just volume, reps, and I'm not thinking of it in terms of stress. And it got me thinking about stress, and not only stress, but very directed stress, because we all know that anybody that's probably against triphasic, they think it's extremely stressful block for someone, essentially. And the thing is, it is. But I've alluded to super maximally loading my power lifters, right, and also loading my football players strategically. And once you get that stress worked out of the body, and you've applied such direct stress over time, that's why we see these results that we've talked about today. At the last meet that I went to, a kid said, "What did y'all do for the last 2 months?" And I said, "Well, we've been doing a lot of work." And see, he was wondering what we've been doing, because we'd gone against him about 2 months before. Once you get all that stress worked out of the body, that's where you just see things slingshot. And again, if you haven't dug into triphasic yet, or if you haven't really looked at it, it just hits you in the face how everything can be utilized to eventually become sport specific. You alluded to the fact earlier about not wanting to train weightlifters. Well, I train powerlifters and I train people who played field sports. So obviously my goal is a little bit different there, but these things can be made sport specific as they're advanced throughout the year if you're willing to attach the right trains to each other, essentially. So all this stuff we're talking about, yeah, we might be talking about bilateral back squats, and we may be talking about bench press or split squats. All that can be trained together throughout the entire year to build a holistic athletic profile for people. And that's what I really would say to someone, that it's something that can really slingshot you in the beginning to build a holistic and bulletproof athlete down the line for the competitive season.
Yeah, I guess just, for me, finally, I'm going to piggyback off you, Coach Curtis, just with the central nervous system, and trying to and realizing how to even study more on that, and the effects of this training, and how it just makes makes your kids stronger. And then quite honestly, it led me into the transition into focusing on that with our sprint work, with our speed work. And I know Coach Dixon's does a lot of feed the cats work, and and to me there's a lot of correlation between those two, to where I did a lot more research on that as well. So but really focusing so much on the central nervous system, and just making those quick movements. And Coach Meier, that was a great addition to realizing for everybody that, okay, yes, we do, you're going to eccentric, you're going to isometric, but everything after that is power. It's fast, it's quick. And yeah, that's probably one thing we did miss earlier, was just touching on those on that part, because again, it's all nervous system and triggering those muscles. So yeah.
I guess I'll finish with there's a lot of athletic movements, or in almost all of our athletic movements, whether that's landing a jump or while sprinting, that are a series of isometric contractions or eccentric. And so if you're not training those ever in the weight room, I would say, and you're not overloading and creating that like tendon resiliency and those adaptations, then I don't think you're able to fully, you can never bulletproof your athletes, but I think you can set them up for, better injury prevention, I guess, than just working on the concentric side. And what you don't also, unless you're doing the true heavy eccentrics where you can't lift the weight back up, which probably most of us don't do at the high school setting. When you do an eccentric block, you're also doing a concentric block. You're training both. And I think sometimes people forget about that. But I don't know if it's for time's sake or whatever, but it's like anything else. If you teach it and you demonstrate it and you model it, the kids will adapt. Like you said, I think it was great points about the time. That's something that that I always fight, but I guess I'm not that smart to think about adding more seconds, but that's definitely something that my athletes are going to say. Coach, I thought we used to do 3 seconds in the hole. Yeah, we're going to try 5 this time, or whatever. But I think just in order to build a better resilient athlete or robustness, I guess is the word people are using. If you're not training the eccentric or the isometric part, I think you're missing that. And I did that for a long time. And it seemed like we went, and part of the reason I didn't get to is, when we kind of switched to the feed the cats and some of the triphasic stuff and I guess got away from just traditional, not necessarily powerlifting, but strength-based work, was because we'd kind of hit a lull. We'd had a series of season-ending injuries, sometimes as many as 4 or 5 on our football team. And I just felt like we needed a change in what we were doing. And, hopefully what we're doing is helping. It seems to be, but, it makes sense to me when you think about having to land a jump or do it repeatedly and things like that, but never train that eccentric part. So I think it's something to definitely look into. Just like anything else, there might be some pushback early. But I think if you talk to some people, just like some of these guys here that have done it in a high school setting, it's one thing to get a huge book, but sometimes that's overwhelming. And so saying, okay, I looked at the book, I understand, reach out to somebody that's tried it. They can say, hey, Cal says this, I tried it with my high school kids. That was super hard. Here's what I did instead. And it might make more sense. I think that helps me, when I can throw ideas off different people and like I said, either try them on yourself. Also, I've heard that a lot of times, but, don't be scared to go out, to think outside the box and figure out, how you can implement some of this stuff.
I'm pretty sure I've heard Cal say something very specific or very similar to what you just said, is like, it doesn't have to be exactly what was in the book. I can't remember. That might've been.
I think Cal's he calls it triphasic too. It's not out yet, but he does a lot of things that aren't in the book or that used to be in the book, but he's kind of taken that whole approach. And that was the one thing, I guess the last thing I'll say, and he said it, how does he know the things that he puts in the book? Well, he's tested it. He's put it in, he's trained, he's tested before, he's tested after. And so, as a strength coach, what things are most important? Is it vertical jump? Is it, your max velocity, your acceleration, your, repeat sprint ability, your power development, and then test pre and post. Okay, this didn't work at this time. We got slower. We got, and sometimes it's okay to get slower. I think someone talked about, or Coach Curtis talked about, sometimes in certain parts of the year, you've got to break them down to build them back up better. And you got to kind of know and track and see where you're at. And that kind of goes to the programming that you guys all talked about. But, you need to figure out, I guess, through your metrics that you gather, what you like about it, what it's helping your athletes do, and so forth. And I always tell people when I talk about, our football stuff, take what you like, throw out what you don't like. You've got to be able to live with it. And I think in this book and what you guys have talked about, there's lots of things that you can take from it, if you don't adopt the whole system, so to speak.
Hey, I'm kind of throwing this out here, but I know you guys are all interested in helping others out. I lean on Coach Meier a lot. I'll be like, hey, I need help with this. And in like 2 seconds, he's writing me back. And I know these other guys are of similar molds. What I'd like to do here is I'll put contact information in the show notes. People can reach out and contact, no doubt. But I bet you all of these coaches would hop on a call with you, maybe a Zoom, and just kind of take you through some of their programming, what it looked like in their situations, that type of stuff to continue the conversation. So look for that in the show notes. I'm kind of speaking for them, but I think they're all good dudes. So we'll play it like that. And then just thankful for this crew to get together tonight and talk through it. Coach Dixon's right in the middle or almost starting his season. So it's a pretty cool deal for Illinois and being able to get a season in. And I know that everybody's taking time out of their schedules to do this. So appreciative of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, keep up the great job on the podcast. It's awesome.